People who met their soulmate while on vacation. What happened? My earliest memories are of my mom looking down at me, shaking her head and calling me ugly. I've always had a plain-looking face with awful skin, and my mom never missed an opportunity to remind me that I would never get a boyfriend with skin like that. Even when I was a kid, she was 100% right. My dull skin had this heavy gray tone to it and my eye bags only set deeper as I aged. I've always gotten itchy eczema flares up on my face as well that my mom had been trying to cover up with makeup since I was a kid. My mom had broken me over the years, and even after I turned 18, I never talked back or stood up for myself. So, when she told me we were visiting her family in Finland for a month, she gave me no choice but to go. We had only been in Finland for a couple days before the tension burst. I had actually been feeling okay up until then because my skincare routine had been working better for some reason since we had arrived, but even on vacation my mom tore me down like it was her job. We were at a fancy brunch with my family. Everyone was talking and laughing but ignoring me since I didn't speak the language. My mom wanted to take group photos, and since my skin had been clearing up in Finland, I got up to pose next to my relatives. That's when my mom grabbed me by the elbow and whispered, "You're already ruining my trip. Do you really have to ruin the photos with your blotchy face?" I walked straight out and didn't stop walking until I plopped myself down on a bench a block from the restaurant and burst out in tears. I cried not only for me, but for the little girl inside me whose mom had convinced her she was ugly before she could even read. When I went to wipe my tears away, I was comforted by the realization that my skin didn't burn like it usually did when I cried. I think I would have kept crying there for hours if I hadn't been distracted by a deadly smell. I turned and noticed I had sat next to the cutest Finnish boy I had ever seen. He had strawberry blonde shoulder-length hair tucked behind his ears, and the horrid smell was coming from his lunchbox. He was looking at me with the most sympathetic deep blue eyes. To my surprise, he asked me in perfect English if I was okay, introduced himself as Alexei, and asked if there was anything he could do for me. I thanked him and said no, and then gagged on accident when he offered me some of his gross-smelling fish. He teased me about not wanting to try Finnish foods, and I made him laugh by saying I wasn't eating any foods that smelt like one of Shrek's farts. We spent an hour on that bench together and by the next hour he was showing me around the city. By the end of the day he was kissing me goodbye at the door of my Airbnb. He had spent the entire day showering me with compliments, saying that my face reminded him of Taurata lunta, which he told me meant fresh snow in Finnish. He called me perfect over and over, and I had never had anyone compliment my face so honestly. When I got home that night, my mom ripped me a new one as soon as I walked in the door. Yet for the first time in my life, I didn't give a damn what she thought. I spent the rest of the trip with Alexei, silencing my mom's calls and ignoring her in general. One night after I got home, she said I was too ugly to so I must be free, and I surprised both of us by laughing in her face and walking away. How could I care about what that old hag had to say when Alexei was making me feel like the most special girl in the world? Every morning he said my face looked more heavenly than the day before, and it wasn't until a few weeks into my trip that I realized he was right. My skin was looking glossier by the day, and my eye bags were almost completely faded. Alexei took me to all his favorite restaurants and showed me the house he grew up in. One day he took me to the countryside and we made grass on a picnic blanket. Afterward, he put wildflowers in my hair and stroked my face, asking me where I'd like to explore next. I was falling in love with him, and all of his sincere compliments drowned out the sound of my mom's name calling. By the end of my trip, I felt like a new person. My skin had done a complete 180, and my face's usual gray tone had been replaced by a pinkish glow. The grass hadn't even triggered my eczema and I realized I hadn't had a flare-up the entire time I was in Finland. On the last day Alexei and I spent together, he broke down in tears and asked if he could please come visit me. I whipped out my phone and bought a ticket for him on the spot as we giggled together with excitement. When he kissed me for the last time, I had to hold on to him to keep myself from fainting. But every shred of happiness I had found in Finland would be ripped away from me in under a week after returning home. I had completely forgotten how dull and gross my skin usually was, and I had zero idea what had changed since Finland. I had one of the worst breakouts I've ever experienced and my eczema came back in full force. One morning, I was examining two huge patches of red, stingy eczema in the mirror when my mom walked by and said that I looked like a rotting dead body. She reminded me that no man would ever be attracted to a face like mine. My skin was irritated and painful, but her words stung worse. I ran into my bedroom, smashed the only small mirror I had in there, and cancelled Alexei's flight. I couldn't let him see me like this. I looked nothing like I did in Finland, and I couldn't have him fly all the way here just to reject me in person once he saw how ugly I really was. Alexei pleaded with me to change my mind, but it hurt too much to talk to him, so I ghosted. My heart was broken, my skin was atrocious, and my mom despised me, but I was sick of being a victim, and ever since Finland I knew my skin could look better. So why the hell had I only had healthy skin in Finland? I was determined to find out, and after hours of research I finally solved the mystery. While I was watching a dermatologist's video on the effects of hard water, she demonstrated how to test your own home by filling a plastic water bottle up halfway and adding in a couple of drops of dish soap. If the soapy water does not bubble to the top after you shake it, your house has hard water. It turns out, my skincare products had never worked the right way because it was my house's water itself that had been damaging my skin. Apparently my skin had upgraded so quickly in Finland because they had some of the best tap water due to their superior pipe systems. Sure enough, my house failed the hard water test, but at least I finally knew what had been damaging my skin all along. I kept searching for solutions and eventually got a targeted ad for something called the Q-Urify sink filter. It was a tiny inexpensive filter that screwed right onto my sink and filtered out all my water's overproduction of magnesium and calcium that caused everything from acne to eczema to accelerated aging. I ordered the filter, but since I hadn't found many fixes for hard water, if this filter failed me I would be doomed to keep damaging my face with the toxic water. I redid the hard water test as soon as my filter arrived, and exhaled all of my doubt when the bubbles crawled to the top of the bottle. Since it had only taken a few weeks for my skin to clear in Finland, I knew the Q-Urify filter would have my skin back to its pristine state in no time. After 2 weeks of washing my face with the soft water, my skin was finally looking just as clear and glossy as it had in Finland, and I felt my confidence building back up. The more my skin repaired itself, the less of my mom's poop I took, and I started calling her a bitter old hag anytime she tried to come for me, and it seemed to shut her up for good. My new confidence wasn't only giving me a spine, but making me reconsider the potential relationship I had thrown away over nothing as well. I thought of Alexei every day, and I hated myself for hurting him. Even though my skin was rapidly improving, even as my eye bags disappeared, I couldn't forget the first person who had looked at me and seen beauty. I hadn't had an eczema outbreak on my face since using the filter, and I decided that I finally felt confident enough to face Alexei again. I opened up our WhatsApp convo for the first time since the day I canceled the flight. I couldn't fight the tears as I saw that Alexei had sent me a sweet paragraph every day since I had ghosted him, saying how much he missed holding my soft face in his hands, how much he missed making me laugh. In one message he said he was about to swim across the ocean just to hear the sound of my voice again. My heart burst and I called him right then and there. We stayed on the phone for 4 hours straight, crying and reconnecting. By the end of the call I asked him if he would still want to come see me. He said that he had already bought his new ticket during the phone call, and I dug my face into my pillow to keep from screaming with excitement. That's when Alexei threw me for a loop by suddenly mentioning in a shy voice that when he arrived, he had something important he needed to ask me.